Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
I want to thank you guys as always for tuning in. Joining us this week is unbeaten bantamweight prospect Michael Angeletti. Plus, we're going to take a look at Rolando Romero versus Ismael Barroso Saturday night on Showtime. That's this week's PBC Fight of the Week. And on Toe-to-Toe, Mike and I will look at 5 potential opponents for Canelo, Alvarez, and the potential outcomes. Speaking of Canelo, the Mexican legend returned last weekend, successfully defended his undisputed 168-pound title with a 12-round unanimous decision over John Ryder. Mike, what was your take on how Canelo looked?
I thought it was a so-so performance. I gave him a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. Yes, he won convincingly, and he deserves credit for that against, a solid guy. At the same time, to me, he didn't look like a guy who was number one pound for pound a few fights ago. And he couldn't stop a guy who he basically hit at will. To me, he just didn't look sharp. He's a little slower, a little less energetic, even a little less determined, maybe. I think he's definitely declining, although we can debate how much so.
Yeah, I'd like to get into that in a little bit. I thought he did look a little slower and a bit more indecisive, but I mean, he won 9-3 at worst. So I guess that, proves he's still an elite fighter. How about Ryder? I've seen him getting a lot of praise for his brave performance.
Well, he did all a fighter could do, in my opinion. I think he performed about as well as he could. He just had neither the ability nor the punching power to compete, with a guy even with this version of Alvarez. I gave him 3 of the 12 rounds. I was in awe of his resilience, his guts. I think like everybody was. That was breathtaking on some level. That probably won him a lot of fans, but he really wasn't that competitive in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, gallant, yes, but severely overmatched. Let's get to the question that's on everyone's lips, which you alluded to earlier. Is Canelo fading, or is it just hard for him to get up for guys like John Ryder?
I don't know. If he wasn't up for that fight, he certainly should have been. It was his first fight since he lost to Dimitri Bivol, his first fight in like a decade, and his first fight in Mexico, in his home country, in more than a decade. I mean, come on, that's a big deal. I'm sure he wanted to make a strong statement, and I'm really not sure he did, even though it was such a one-sided fight. And again, yes, I think he's fading. Why? I thought one of his former handlers had an interesting idea. Maybe he needs to take a year or 2 off. He's been fighting on the pro level nonstop since he was 15 years old, which is, more than 17 years ago. Maybe he's burned out. That's kind of how he looked to me on Saturday, almost like he was going through the motions. There was no fire there. Even toward the end of the fight, when I thought he'd pick up his intensity to try to get the knockout, he really didn't. It was real mechanical, cold, got the job done, just, muscle memory. He's a great fighter, Hall of Famer, but yeah. I don't know. I think he's faded.
Yeah, it's a good point regarding the time off. I feel like the window to do that has passed. There was a time probably where he should have taken a year off. I mean, Floyd Mayweather took a couple years off. Sugar Ray did. Roy Jones, even after he knocked out Montel Griffin in the rematch, he didn't fight again. I think that fight was in like August. He didn't fight again for what was for him a significantly long time. And so I do think that that's often a good idea. I just think that at this point of his career, he really can't do that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Vitaly Klitschko, I think, was off for 4 years, and I think he was older than Canelo. In fact, I'm pretty sure he was older than Canelo. He came back and became heavyweight title holder again. So you can do it, but I hear what you're saying. That makes sense. And the guy's going to be 33 on his next birthday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Especially, heavyweights are a little different. I feel like they mature a little later, and they can, their prime seems to last a little longer. Look, regarding Canelo, I can't tell if it's because he's past his best or, if he's just uninspired fighting someone like John Ryder. Maybe it's both. It happens. It particularly happens actually in a lot of hometown fights for some reason. What I do know, though, is that every great fighter has one last great performance. I know that's not always true, but it's true a lot of times. And I wouldn't be surprised if Canelo is significantly better against a Benavidez, for instance. Speaking of whom, who would you like to see Canelo face next, and why?
Uh, well, yeah, if they called me and said, Mike, you get to decide who Canelo fights next, and I'm happy to share my cell number with them if they want it. I'd say David Benavidez. Again, I get why he wants to fight Dimitri Bivol again, but I just think we're going to get into this later, but I just think that's it's going to be futile. It's just the same thing's going to happen again. The fans want him to fight Benavidez, who would make for a really fun, explosive fights. And Canelo would stand, in my opinion, would stand a better chance of winning that fight. I'm not saying he would, but I think he'd stand a better chance. He'd have to sacrifice the revenge factor, that he wants with Bivol, but I think he'd be worth it. I think Canelo versus Benavidez would be very special on more than one level.
Yeah, and you touched on the competitive aspect, and looking at it commercially, the Benavidez fight is huge.
Another thing. Yeah,
it does at least 1 million pay-per-view buys. I've seen obviously the hardcore fans are discussing it, but I'm surprised at the number of casual fans I know who are talking about it, who were talking about it even before the outcome of the Ryder fight, before the first bell rang. We're saying, man, he needs to fight Benavidez. And beyond that, I think boxing needs to fight like that. So we'll see what's, next for Canelo. We're going to discuss that a little bit later in the show. But for now, let's jump right into the PBC fight of the week. This Saturday, May 13th, Rolando Romero seeks to make a name for himself at 140 pounds as he takes on Ismael Barroso in a premier boxing champions event at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. The action live on Showtime begins at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we begin here with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Romero, 14-1 with 12 knockouts. Barroso is 24-3-2 with 22 knockouts. Both guys are 4-1 in their last 5 with 3 KOs. Barroso's actually won 4 straight, although you might not know the guys he beat. Last fight for Romero was Tank Davis, lost by 6th round knockout in May of last year. Barroso beat Fernando David Saucedo by a 4th round knockout last August. Romero's 80% knockout percentage, Barroso 76. Romero's only fought 57 pro rounds, which I find interesting is he only had like 35 amateur fights or something like that, I want to say. So it's amazing what he's done with his limited experience. 116 rounds for Barroso. Romero's got a big edge in the next category. He's 27 years old. Barroso's 40, according to BoxRec. Romero turned pro in 2016. Barroso turned pro way back in 2005. Romero fights from an orthodox stance. Barroso's a southpaw, just like Puello, the guy who fell out of the fight. The dimensions are similar. 5'8" for Romero, 5'8.5" for Barroso, 68-inch reach for Romero, 69 for Barroso. Romero was born and raised in Las Vegas, and Barroso's from Venezuela, but he's based in Miami.
Well, you've given us a rundown on the stats, essentially. What about in the ring? Give us your thoughts on the style matchup.
It's more of a fan-friendly fight than the Puello matchup. Puello is a slick, athletic boxer who doesn't thrive in like toe-to-toe exchanges. That's not what he wants, not who he is. It could have been a situation where Romero had to chase down Puello. Barroso is a solid boxer, but he engages his opponents more. He's much more aggressive, and he's a big, big puncher. I went back and watched some of his fights, and he really cracks. That's the coolest thing about this fight is that both guys have the kind of power that can end any fight in an instant. It should be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think you kind of led me to my next question. What makes Barroso a threat? I think we're in agreement here based on what you just said.
Right, the power. Again, he's a solid boxer. Yeah, I like the way he moves actually in the ring, and he's a pretty good athlete too. That's how he's able to land those big shots that he lands. And when he does, they almost always hurt the opponent. I mean, 22 knockouts and 24 victories is an eye opener. Even I interviewed Raleigh a couple days ago, and he even told me, listen, I can't fall asleep on this guy. If he does fall asleep on this guy, he could be put to sleep.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's what makes this fight so fun. What about Romero and his mindset, coming off that one punch loss to Gervonta Davis? Do you believe that experience helps him, or does that loss hurt him?
It's hard to say. Yeah, we actually talked about that when I interviewed him. He told me that he felt like a winner after the Davis fight, even though he was stopped, as you just described. He fought Tank on roughly even terms until the stoppage, and he gained a lot of big fight experience in that fight. So he said that made him a smarter, better fighter. Of course, we never know what impact a knockout loss like that will have until we see how he performs in the ring, in the next fight or two. But he's saying the right things, and he really sounds confident. He sounds good to me.
Yeah, and it may not even be mentally. Sometimes, it's physical. Can you take a punch the same after that? I mean, a lot of questions
That's
to be asked
point.
here.
Yeah, never know.
Who are you picking?
Well, this isn't an easy fight for Romero, but I think he's a level above Barroso. Remember the last two times Barroso stepped up in class, he was stopped by Anthony Crolla and Bouhairie Akhmedov. We might be looking at the same sort of thing with him. I think Romero probably outboxes him. He'll pick his spots, eventually hurt him, and score a mid to late round knockout. But I have to reiterate, though, this guy can really punch. Romero has to be clever. It could be a disaster.
Yeah, I think it's especially dangerous. Yeah, and that's why I raised that point about Romero and taking a shot. We all saw that, or there was that sparring footage, which probably should have never came out, of someone dropping him in camp a few weeks or months back, assuming it was somewhat recent. And so this is a really dangerous fight for Romero. Nevertheless, I'm going with him by mid-round TKO, even though it is a more dangerous fight than people realize, and Barroso's crafty and carries that pop. I think it should be interesting. I just expect Romero to be a little quicker on the trigger.
Yeah, now, maybe I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe we learn in this fight. Maybe you're right. Maybe we learn in this fight that he can take a big punch. But that's what one of many things that makes the matchup interesting.
Yeah, it really is, and I mean, that wasn't Davis's biggest shot that floored him and had him, on unsteady legs when he rose. But he did run into it, to be fair. Look, this is just not that type of opponent where you want to make that mistake. And we've seen a lot of fighters. One fighter that comes to mind in particular, Fernando Vargas. Now, obviously, Romero didn't take the kind of brutal beating that Vargas took against Felix Trinidad. But I remember after that fight, it just seemed like, I remember the guy who fought Winky, and he fought Ike, and took a lot of good shots. Never really took a step back against either one of those guys. But against Wilfredo Rivera, and I believe his sparring partner, I forget the name, just didn't have the same sort of punch resistance.
Shibata Flores. Yeah, but
there it is.
But like you said, I was really friendly with him. He's a cool guy, Flores. But that was really in the end he really got beat up by Trinidad. In this case, it was just a big punch by one of the biggest punchers in boxing. But again, you're right. You never know. Psychologically, physically, you just never know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. In the co-feature, guys, Rances Barthélemy faces Omar Juarez. That's a pretty intriguing 140-pound matchup. And opening the TV broadcast is another enticing super lightweight battle as Bouhairie Akhmedov takes on Kenneth Sims Jr. Interesting battle of styles there. Let's go on to our guest this week. He is also returning on Saturday night, faces Michel Banquez in an 8-round bantamweight bout. The PBC 2022 Prospect of the Year, Michael Angeletti. Michael, first things first, how has camp been for your return on Saturday night?
Camp has been tremendous. I think it's probably one of the best camps I've had since I've turned pro.
What's made this camp so different from some of the other ones?
Just the mental focus. I've done up some of the reps on my conditioning. We then manipulated some of my training and changed some things around, and I think it's beneficial. It's benefited me for this fight that's coming.
Now, at this point, do you go to camps for fight? Are you in the gym all the time? What's it like?
I'm in the gym all the time. We just have a period when we turn it down. We might just be focusing on certain things that I think I need to improve on, and when it's time to when we get a fight date, that's when we start to turn it up. We usually have a general idea when I might fight again, so we usually start picking things up when the time is right.
Gotcha.
Michael, your opponent is another step up in class for you. He's 20-3, 14 knockouts, hails from Venezuela. What else can you tell us about him?
We looked at him. We're kind of used to that style, being from Texas, fighting out of Texas. There's a lot of fighters that fight the way that he's fight. He's really flat-footed. He's not really fast. He walks in. He have his hand up in the high guard. I think I can really expose him and really make this a fight where a lot of eyes, when a lot of eyes are looking. It's gonna. I really think I could highlight. This could be a highlight for me.
Sounds like the perfect style for you.
Right.
Yeah. Is this a super bantamweight fight or is it a bantamweight fight?
This is a bantamweight fight.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's it. So, I mean, you began your career, I think, around 124. You've been around super bantamweight. So, what made you decide to move down in weight?
Well, most of my fights been at 122. The reason for 118 is because I'm young and I can still make the weight. Now, my amateur career, the last half of it, when I fought overseas and I fought for Team USA, I was at 114. Initially, when I turned pro, I wanted to be at 118. But, when opportunities come up, you got to kind of, take the risk and fight at weights you don't want to fight. You got to kind of do that sometime. And so that's what I basically done my first 7 fights. And for this, we finally made it happen, finding somebody at the weight that I want to actually fight at.
So do you plan to stick around at this weight then, going forward?
Yeah, that's the plan. As long as my body can make this weight, I'm staying at this weight.
You started.
Of course, if I get an opportunity at 122 and everything is right, then I'll take that too. Because I'm still a good size for 122 as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the right attitude. Now you're 7-0, 6 knockouts. Not a bad start. I mean, could you be happier about how things have gone so far?
Man, I'm extremely happy. I think I've started to sit down on my punches when I turned pro. That this is exactly what I guess it's kind of what I envisioned of me turning pro. When I was amateur, I had a few knockouts, but I mean, never not any knockouts to the body. And now that's mainly been my go-to as when I'm me now as a pro, body shots and just breaking opponents down. And I mean, the only one guy that didn't make it, I think I would have knocked him out too if maybe we had 2 more rounds left.
So you led me directly into my question. So, watching you strike me as more of a boxer than a puncher, yet you've stopped your last 5 opponents in 6 or 7. I mean, are you evolving like into a knockout artist, or are they just coming at this stage of your career?
I mean, I train for the knockout. I don't look for it, but I look for it. I take my time and try to break my opponents down, and then when it's time to take them out, I take them out. I go for the kill. And so, I mean, I'm sort of, I guess you could say that. I mean, I'm looking to knock this guy out as well.
Sounds like it might be the right style to do that. So we want to get your take on a few fights that are currently being discussed in the boxing world. We've got Stephen Fulton defending his titles against Naoya Inoue, who's moving up from bantamweight to challenge him. What are your thoughts on that matchup?
So, with Inoue and Fulton, I think Fulton would edge him. I think there's nothing that I would put bet any money on because it's a 50-50 fight, but I still would edge Fulton. I think Inoue still will carry his power, so Fulton still has to be careful. But I think Fulton, with his slick boxing, that he can beat Inoue.
Now, well, we also saw Gervonta Davis stop Ryan Garcia a couple weeks ago. Give us your thoughts on that bout, and who would you like to see Davis face next?
That's exactly what I thought would happen. I thought Tank would knock him out. I just didn't think it would be with a body shot, but I'm not surprised because Tank, his name is Tank for a reason. He carries power. Yeah. And so next for Tank, I would like to see him fight if it can happen. I know Shakur Stevenson is nice to see.
Yep.
And Devin Haney.
Yeah.
And
I think the Haney fight is... A lot of people talking about that fight. If Haney can get past Lomachenko, whoever wins that fight, maybe, is a great opponent for Tank. What about Canelo Alvarez? I don't know if you saw his fight last week, but who would you like to see him face next?
Man, I would love to see him fight Benavidez. That'll be a great fight for boxing.
Yeah, well, we're on the same page. And of course, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford is the fight everybody wants to see at 147. How do you see that one playing out?
Man, that's a great fight as well. It's 50-50 fight. Whoever shows up that night and is sharp that night will win. But I will have to edge my Texas guy, Errol Spence.
Okay. Getting back to you. I mean, I don't know how much of it sounds like you are a fan, that you pay attention to everything that's going on, but who are some of the young fighters today that you enjoy watching?
I like, let's see, Trayvon Marshall, Lateef Overton, who else? There's a lot of young cats. Let's see, Duke Reagan, Bruce Carrington. There's brothers on the team with me, Team USA. Troy Isley, Tiger Johnson.
I'm gonna go on to Google now and watch all these guys. You do know your stuff. Yeah, great.
Xander Zayas, he's nice. Oh, Quinn Randall, he's I don't think he's with any promotion, but Quinn Randall.
So you were the PBC 2022 Prospect of the Year. Were you surprised by that award, or did you feel it was justified, or maybe both?
A little bit of both. I was coming home from New Orleans, actually, and I had somebody hit me up saying that you got Prospect of the Year. And when I saw that, I thought it was just like some random guy just saying, oh, they think I should win it and whatever like that. So I had kind of disregarded it, and I was like, oh, thank you, man, for telling me I'm your Prospect of the Year or whatever like that. And so he's like, no, man, you're PBC Prospect of the Year. I'm like, oh, let me pull over. So I pulled over, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is big. This is nice. So I was definitely surprised. And I felt it's you always hope that you get some type of award like that. And you never just, I was never like, I hope I get it. It's just something that comes. And when y'all said that I had it, that was really special. I felt really like somebody is actually paying attention, and they see the hard work, they see what I'm doing, so they made me feel real good.
Yeah, we think it was certainly well deserved. In your opinion, how far away are you from world title contention? Another year, 2 years? What do you see?
I think within a year from now, actually. We're moving at a fast track pace, and so I'm ready for the big names right now at 118. That's what I want.
Now, what would your ideal 2023 look like then? What do you see for the rest of the year?
I'm hoping to get at least 2 more fights this year, and then hopefully we can make that happen. Let's get past this guy first, and then hopefully we can get 2 10-rounders in before the year out, and then hopefully get a shot.
I like it very much. Michael, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks as always. We look forward to seeing you do your thing on Saturday night, and we'll have you back on again soon. Yes,
appreciate y'all too, man. Thank you.
The hard-hitting Rolando "Rolling" Romero makes his anticipated return to the ring for a title shot against Ismael Barroso, live from Las Vegas. Romero versus Barroso for the 140-pound interim title on Showtime.
It's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe. This week's topic is 5 potential opponents for Canelo Alvarez and how they would fare. Mike, let's start with David Morrell Jr., the undefeated WBA 168-pound regular champion. How do you like his chances against Canelo?
So we're starting with one of the toughest ones, in my opinion. Part of me wants to say that Morrell isn't evolved enough to beat Alvarez after only 9 fights. I don't know, maybe he has another one by the time he fights him. I think it's reasonable to ask, how could someone with such limited professional experience Even one with 130, 140 amateur fights in the Cuban system, how could that person hang with a great fighter like Canelo Alvarez? Well, I think it's conceivable based on what we've seen in those 9 fights. He's just eaten his opponents alive. He's one of those guys who doesn't appear to have a significant weakness. He could box, he could punch really hard. He seems to have a good chin. And he fights with the poise of a guy who's more experienced than he is.
Yeah.
If he's as good as he seems to be, I think he pushes Alvarez. If he's not, and we won't know until he fights a top guy, then he could be in trouble against Alvarez. And it's a really big if. We just don't know yet with Morrell. But all I can say is I love what I see so far, and I think he'd have a chance based on that.
Yeah, he certainly has the tools, and just based on what you see alone, you have to think he has a pretty good shot. He's tall, great physical build, great amateur background, athletic. He's got elite boxing skills, pop in both hands, and a good cornerman in Ronnie Shields. However, as you said, we haven't really seen the crucible, him tested against the highest opposition. I've still got questions about his chin and his mental fortitude simply because they're really yet to be tested. So
Right.
I don't know how he would fare against, a guy like Canelo, who's got so many tricks in his bag. He could be outboxing Canelo and just walk into a monster counter shot, the kind of punch that he's never been hit with his entire life, and get knocked out. Or maybe he's just that good. It's hard to tell with Morrell because he makes it look so easy.
Yeah. I think he like you said, he's got the tools. I think it's all there, but that's my point. That's our point, is that we think it's there, but we need
Right.
to know. We need to know for sure.
Yeah, exactly. How about someone else who has been talked about quite a bit for Canelo Alvarez over the years, the undefeated 2-division world champion, Demetrius Andrade.
So Andrade has faced some quality opponents, but this would definitely be a step up for him too. And this would be only his second fight at 168 pounds, which would give Alvarez at least a slight advantage in that department. That said, I think Andrade's style might be just all wrong for Alvarez, really, or anyone else for that matter. He's a super athletic, super slick, super awkward southpaw who throws punches, from all kinds of angles with some power, and he's hard to hit cleanly. I can see him outboxing this version of Alvarez, maybe even outclassing him, and winning a decision. I might end up, somebody said, who do you think is going to win? I might end up picking Alvarez to win because I think there are still some question marks surrounding Andrade. And Alvarez is still capable, in spite of what I said about his performance against Ryder. But to say Andrade would be a live underdog, I think is an understatement. I think this guy is a special fighter. And I think he could really push Alvarez hard.
Yeah, he's another one, certainly has the tools and has proven it over a long period of time with a good resume and accomplishments. And I think his styles, you mentioned that southpaw, unorthodox style, and Andrade's the type of fighter too who can hurt you early and make you tentative for the rest of the fight. Because you don't know where some of the shots are coming from. It's not that he's that unorthodox, but he's creative, behind a solid foundation of boxing skills. I mean, this guy was a brilliant, brilliant amateur. At this stage of his career, they're both around the same age. Andrew might actually be a little bit older, but I could see ways that Canelo could beat him as well. So to me, it's just a really, really good matchup. And if that was the route that Canelo decided to take, I'd love it, although he hasn't shown any inclination.
Well, I wanted to follow, but nobody has an inclination to fight this guy. I mean, there's a reason why he hasn't fight like a top guy, because if I'm advising my fighter, I don't want him in the ring with that guy. He's the kind of guy that even if you beat him, you're going to look horrible.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I get
exactly.
it.
It could make it a rough night for you. How about the current undefeated WBC middleweight world champion, Jermall Charlo?
So Canelo would have a size advantage because Charlo would be moving up in weight. But I think Charlo matches up well with Canelo otherwise, pretty much across the board. I've always thought that. I mean, this isn't like something that just came up because Alvarez seems to be slipping a little bit. I've always thought that. I'm not sure people realize or appreciate how good Charlo is. I think they focus more on Jermell, maybe for good reason, but I don't think people get how good Jermall is. I see him as a top level all around fighter who could compete with anyone, including Alvarez. Maybe he could be, tell me if you think I'm wrong, maybe he could be compared to Daniel Jacobs, who gave a better version of Alvarez a tough fight. So I'd give Charlo a decent chance of beating Alvarez. Now, there's one caveat. Charlo would have to get a few fights under his belt after his long layoff. The last thing he should do is just jump right into the ring with Alvarez after a long break. That said, I'd like to see Charlo at his best against Alvarez. I think that's a competitive matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Danny Jacobs comparison is a good one. I think at his best, Charlo's probably a little better than Danny Jacobs,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
With a different sort of mindset in the ring too that I would have loved to have seen against Canelo Alvarez. Jamal's just mean in the ring. He's willing to stand in there and fight fire with fire, and pretty sharp boxer as well. Power in both fists. Look, I'm with you. I would like to see him get a fight or two under his belt before fighting a Canelo, since he's been off for so long. I wouldn't knock him if he decided to go into a Canelo fight straight away. I mean,
Business-wise.
but or who knows? Maybe it's what you mentioned regarding Canelo, which is that the time off might rejuvenate Charlo, and he comes back
That's
refreshed
interesting. That's
and
interesting. You might be right.
and ready to roll, and having a great camp. I don't know, but this fight has been talked about for so long, and it's just so unfortunate that we haven't seen it at this stage. Regardless, I hope Jamal gets a big fight soon, and I would love it if it was against Canelo.
Obviously, my number one fight, I've already said it, is Canelo versus Benavidez, but maybe that's number two for me. I would just love to see the fight. I don't think people get how good of a fight that would be.
Yeah, exactly, and how good of a fighter Jamal is. He needs to remind us again, hopefully soon. Let's move on to a man that has already beaten Canelo Alvarez, Dimitri Bivol. Based on what you saw on Saturday night, how does a rematch play out?
Well, you kind of alluded to this at the beginning of the podcast. Listen, great fighters often find a way to do great things. An inspired, determined, and healthy Alvarez, his wrist seems to be fine now. I think that version of Alvarez has a chance to win that fight. But do I think he will win that fight? No, I definitely do not think he will win that fight. I mean, the first fight could have been more convincing from my perspective. All three judges had it 7-5, but that was just stupid. I gave Bivol 9 rounds and Canelo 3 rounds. And I thought that pretty much reflected what happened in the fight. Bivol is just bigger and better than this version of Alvarez, maybe any version of Alvarez. Bivol's a big athletic guy with truly elite skills who has some pop in his punches. It's just not a good matchup for Canelo. I'll add that I need to add that I applaud Alvarez for wanting the fight. He wants to reverse the earlier result under the exact same terms, which is kind of cool. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, me neither. I just don't see it in a rematch. Nothing that occurred on Saturday night showed me that Canelo Alvarez would fare that much better in a rematch. Nothing that occurred when Canelo fought Triple G in that third fight last year showed that to me either. I just don't see it. In fact, I think if Bivol had pressed on the gas a little bit, who knows what might have happened in that fight. It was that convincing. I mean, I'm with you. I thought he won about 9 rounds or so. Really, after the early rounds, he almost steamrolled Canelo. It was extremely one-sided. I haven't gone back to look at what the punch stats were or anything for that fight, but I didn't see anything. I walked away from that fight thinking, I don't think Canelo ever beats this guy, and nothing I've seen since has convinced me otherwise. I really don't see it with Bivol.
You know what? I'm sorry.
No, I was going to ask you, what about, they're going back and forth now. Canelo wants it at 75, Bivol wants it at 160. What do you make of all that? And does it even matter in your opinion?
It could matter. In spite of what Bivol says, Bivol's apparently, was I talking to you about this? Bivol seems to think it wouldn't be an issue for him at all to get down to 168. I guess he fought lower than 75 recently. He didn't think it would be an issue, but it still would worry me. I just don't like it because it's not his weight. I keep thinking of who went down in weight. Well, anyway, think of
many people
right. Who went down in weight and regretted it afterward.
Yeah.
It's just not a smart thing to do. But to answer your question, it probably wouldn't matter. I get why both guys want to fight at the weight that they want to fight at. Bivol at 68 and Canelo at 75, but I want it to happen at 75 because that's where it should happen. And Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, but I think that Canelo's got more clout. I think he's going to win out. So there's no doubt in my mind to be set by. But I was going to say, based on what you were saying earlier, when's the last time like Canelo really looked great in a fight? Where you go, wow, this guy really looks great. Maybe he looked pretty good against Callum Smith, who was pretty dominating.
That guy didn't throw back. I
don't know. I don't know when the last fight was.
I was impressed by his performance against Plant simply because I thought Plant was really on his A game that night and had a great game plan and was having a lot more success than he is credited for. And it just seems like Canelo, something I've not seen him do since in that fight is he surged late. He found another gear and just poured it on late that 9th, 10th, 11th rounds. Well, 10th and 11th really. He was throwing bombs and landing bombs and showed great stamina, great conditioning, and carried his pop late. I haven't seen him do that since.
That's a good call because I have a lot of respect for Plant. Although then he went on to lose to Benavidez, but I do have respect for him. It was a good performance. But I think the last time I was just going through Canelo's record as we're talking here. I think the last time where I said "wow" at the end of a Canelo fight was when he knocked out Amir Khan.
That's a long time ago.
Which is 2016. After that he beat Liam Smith. Okay, of course he beat Liam Smith. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Yeah, the Golovkin fights which were disputed. Rocky Fielding doesn't matter. Jacobs, that was a good performance, but it was close. It wasn't dominating. Kovalev, he looked horrible. I thought not horrible. I didn't think he looked good until the end. Until the end, he didn't look. It was like he was losing on at least one of the cards.
He was, but I felt like he wasn't there to win a decision. Like he just calmly went about the task of breaking Kovalev down.
That was a good win. It was a good win. But I wasn't really dazzled by the end of that thing. At any rate, it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Well, hopefully we get to see if he has one more great fight left in him, or not, and will it be against this man? Last but not least, David Benavidez. How do you see that fight playing out?
So as I said, I think it's a better matchup than Bivol for Alvarez. Both in terms of size and style. First, they're both 168 pounders, which is how it's supposed to be. They're in the same weight class. And Benavidez fights aggressively, which should suit Alvarez's style better. I think that David has a higher boxing IQ than people might realize, but I can see him getting caught with some nasty body shots coming in, for example. You never know how he might cope with that. I pick Benavidez to win, though. He's younger, particularly strong super middleweight, has quick hands. Everybody agrees on that. He punches with accuracy and in bunches. And I just think he's a really, really good fighter in his prime, which I can't say for Canelo. I have to say that it would be by far the biggest challenge of Benavidez' career, but I think he'd be up to it. And I'll add that I'm not sure there's a better fight from a fan perspective. I'll say that again. That's the main reason people want to see it. I mean, Canelo's Canelo. People love watching him fight. And Benavidez is as much fun to fight as anybody in the world. You put those guys together, I mean, come on. That'd be just a blast.
Yeah, it really is. And you're right. It may be a better style matchup for Canelo, but I see some traits actually that are similar to Bivol in Benavidez. Even though he's a 168 pounder, he's a huge 168 pounder. That was apparent when he fought Caleb Plant, and he just dwarfed him. And Caleb Plant looks significantly bigger than Canelo. So I'm really
good point.
I'm really interested to see how that would look in the ring. And another thing that he does that Bivol does well is he throws punches in combinations and he utilizes his jab. And I think that if he can, keep Canelo at the end of his shots, then he can duplicate what Bivol did. However, they have two different, demeanors in the ring. I'm talking about Bivol and Benavidez. So Benavidez might be the person who turns it up and could potentially get Canelo out of there or beat him up and stop him, especially if Canelo starts to fade late. And, Benavidez, he just gets stronger as the fight progresses. The fight could be more one-sided than people expect, or who knows? Canelo, the great counterpuncher, could catch an over-aggressive Benavidez coming in with the big shot and the fight. I don't know, but oh my goodness, just thinking about the build up to the fight, the trainers talking trash, Mexican pride on the line, everything. The old guard, the new, can the great fighter, pull off one last great performance? Is it the young fighter's time? It's got every single element, and I think that that's a fight that touches the mainstream and does big, big numbers.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up some interesting points about the matchup. David's aggression could work in his favor, where in the end, like you said, that Canelo sometimes fades a little bit, and David comes on strong. Maybe he knocks him out, or the aggression could work against him. Like maybe he's, like you said, maybe he's a little too aggressive and he gets caught. I think the difference between Bivol and Benavidez, one of the differences is the footwork. I think Bivol's more athletic,
Yeah,
and so he's able to maneuver better, which is a good weapon against Canelo. I mean, David's going to be there. He's a really smart boxer and he's clever, and I don't think he's like easy to hit necessarily by any means. He can hit him, but he's not that easy to hit. Bivol, I think, might be the hardest to hit in the business, one of a handful of guys.
Yeah, he's and great point regarding footwork. Yeah, certainly he's a little more fleet-footed. He's a little more active. His whole style, nothing about him really is stationary. Always in position. Yeah, I don't see that fight ending well for Canelo, and I don't think that it's as financially viable as a Benavidez fight. So I'm just not sure why he would go that route, other than the revenge factor, which I understand, and we'll see. Like you, I don't think that Bivol has that much leverage, so he'd probably have to do what Canelo says or keep it moving. That said, the fight I definitely want to see is David Benavidez, and I think there are a lot of fight fans who are in agreement with that. And that's going to do it for this week's show. We want to thank Michael Angeletti for joining us. Of course, we look forward to seeing him on Saturday night, as well as Rolando Romero versus Ismael Barroso in the main event of the PBC on Showtime event taking place at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. We look forward to breaking that down next week and, of course, talking more boxing right here on the PBC Podcast.